Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. You know how people say you can feel when something's off? That gut feeling that tugs at your ribs like a child pulling your sleeve? I had that. It started as a whisper, a silence where laughter used to live. Her morning kisses got shorter, her messages lost their emojis, and she stopped doing that thing where she tucked her hair behind her ear when she looked at me. I thought it was work stress. I blamed her deadlines. I even blamed the weather. Never in a million years did I think she was slowly slipping away, not just from me, but towards someone else. And not just anyone else. My brother. My own flesh and blood. But at that time, all I saw was silence. Cold silence. And I kept telling myself not to overthink it. I should have known better. I should have asked the right questions. But love makes you blind, and silence makes you deaf. It sounds silly, right? But I noticed. She used to say babe, like it was punctuation. Babe, did you eat? Babe, I miss you. Babe, let's stay in tonight. But one day it vanished. Just gone. Replaced by my name. Hey, Clara. That's how she started speaking to me. Like we were polite strangers. I remember standing in the kitchen one night, stirring her favorite pasta, and she walked in and said, "Thanks, Clara." That's it. Not a smile, not a kiss, not a look. I froze mid-stir. I almost dropped the spoon. I wanted to ask, "What's wrong? Are we okay?" But my pride stitched my mouth shut. Instead, I kept stirring. I kept hoping. Meanwhile, behind my back, she was slowly creating a world I didn't belong in. A future I wasn't part of. And I would have never guessed who was already in it with her. I didn't think much of it at first. He said he missed me, wanted to reconnect. Family stuff, you know. We hadn't been close in years. So I welcomed it. I welcomed him. I even asked her, "Isn't it nice that he's around again?" And she'd smile. But not at me. Not really. One night, I walked in on them laughing in the living room, just the two of them. Something about the way her hand touched his knee during a joke. It felt too familiar. Too natural. Like they shared something I wasn't part of. But again, I shook it off. Because who suspects that? Whoever imagines their partner might fall in love with their sibling. It's unthinkable. Unforgivable. But the heart doesn't ask for permission. And hers had already moved. I'll never forget that day. Not because it was my birthday, but because she didn't say a word about it. Not happy birthday. Not even a card. She didn't even look guilty. Just distracted. Lost. Like her soul had already moved into a new chapter without me. My brother, though, he texted me. Short, simple, but at least he remembered. I told her that night, "It's okay if you forgot." She blinked and said, "Forgot what?" That moment, it cracked something in me. But still, I held on. Desperately. Pathetically. Because when you love someone, you keep making excuses for their distance, thinking it's temporary. Thinking they'll come back. But she was already gone. And I was about to find out why in the most heartbreaking way. She never let me touch that old blue journal. Said it was just poems and dumb thoughts. I believed her. Until one evening when she left it on the bed. Open. Like it was meant to be seen. And I looked. Of course I looked. I wish I hadn't. Page after page of entries about confusion, guilt, longing, and him. Not named, but described so clearly, I knew. He understands me like no one else, she'd written. It's crazy that I used to see him as just her brother. Now I see him differently, dangerously differently. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at the pages, the ink bleeding into my soul like poison. That night, I didn't confront her. I just closed the book, laid beside her, and cried in silence. Because now I knew. I finally knew. Could I? How could I pretend that everything was okay when I had just discovered the most excruciating truth? The words, the thoughts, the feelings were all swimming in my head, but I couldn't make sense of them. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something inside me snapped, but it wasn't enough to break the silence. I let her make breakfast. I let her smile. I let her pretend everything was normal, when in my heart, everything was already shattered. What do you do when you find the truth? You hold it inside, like an unbearable weight, and let it crush you in quiet despair. So that's what I did. I waited for the moment when she couldn't pretend anymore. A few days passed, and she tried. Oh, she tried. She smiled more, touched my arm a little longer, made the kind of small talk we used to have. But it wasn't the same. I knew it. She knew it. The distance had already been carved into the space between us, and no amount of fake affection could fill it. One evening, as we sat on the couch, She brought up the journal casually. I know you probably saw it, she began, her voice small, as if she were preparing to confess. But she didn't. Not really. She said it was just a phase, just something she wrote in a moment of confusion. I don't know what came over me, she said. It doesn't mean anything. I wanted to believe her. But her eyes told a different story. And I could see that she wasn't lying about everything. She was lying about one thing. Her heart wasn't here anymore. It was somewhere else. With him. I'll never forget the day I walked into the living room and saw them there, sitting too close, too comfortable. He was laughing at something she said, and her smile, it wasn't the smile of a friend. It wasn't the smile of a sister-in-law. It was a smile of someone who was already in love. My brother's hand brushed her leg under the table. And that was it. I stood frozen at the doorway, unable to move, unable to speak. Everything came crashing down at that moment. The denial, the hope, the lies I told myself, they all shattered like glass at my feet. She looked up, her face pale as she saw me standing there. My brother didn't even seem to notice. Clara, she said softly, but I couldn't hear her. I couldn't hear anything over the pounding in my ears. The truth was finally staring me in the face, and I couldn't escape it. It happened that night. The conversation we had been avoiding, the one we both knew was inevitable. She came to me, her face filled with tears, her eyes searching for understanding I couldn't give. Clara, I never wanted to hurt you, she began, but her voice trembled as she spoke. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did, and I can't lie to you anymore. Her words caught in her throat, but I didn't need her to finish. I already knew. I had known for weeks. It wasn't just the way she acted distant. It was the way she looked at him, the way she touched him, the way she loved him. You're in love with my brother, aren't you? I said it flatly, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. She broke down then, her tears falling as she nodded. I am, Clara. I never meant for this to happen. I swear I never meant to hurt you. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear my heart out and throw it away. But instead, I sat there, staring at her, watching the woman I loved confess the most painful truth I'd ever hear. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, I began to find peace in myself. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but I was healing. I started to rediscover things I loved doing. I began focusing on my career again, spending time with friends, and taking care of myself in ways I hadn't done in months. There were still moments of sadness, moments when the weight of everything felt too heavy to bear, but they were becoming fewer. The truth was, as much as they had hurt me, they had given me the freedom to rediscover who I was. I had lost myself in trying to please someone else, trying to hold on to a love that wasn't meant to last. Now, I was learning to love myself again. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One afternoon, as I sat at my favorite cafe, I had an epiphany. Moving on wasn't just about letting go of them. It was about letting go of my expectations. I had built a future in my mind, a future where everything was perfect, where she was mine and only mine. But the truth was, I couldn't keep holding on to something that had already slipped away. I couldn't keep mourning a love that had never been meant to last. The truth was, moving on was about embracing the future, not clinging to the past. I wasn't giving up on love. I was just giving up on the idea that love could be something it wasn't. And in that moment, I realized that this was the first step toward healing. Letting go of my idealized version of what I thought was perfect, and accepting that sometimes, things don't turn out the way we hope. And that's okay. It wasn't until months later that I truly understood what it meant to begin again. I had spent so much time worrying about what I lost, that I didn't see the opportunities opening in front of me. I started a new project at work, one that I had put off for years. I reconnected with old friends I had distanced myself from in the chaos of my relationship. I found myself laughing again, genuinely laughing, not out of desperation to hide the pain, but because I truly found joy in the moment. It was like waking up from a bad dream. Slowly, I realized that maybe my life wasn't ruined after all. Maybe this was just a new chapter. A chapter that didn't have to be defined by them, but by me. And for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. Hopeful for the future and the possibilities it held. Then, one day, I received a letter. Not a text, not an email, an actual letter. I recognized her handwriting immediately. My hands shook as I opened it. She apologized again. But this time, it wasn't just a few words of regret. It was a heartfelt, raw confession. She admitted to everything. The lies, the betrayal, the way she had hurt me. She acknowledged the pain she had caused and how she had let her own fears and insecurities dictate her choices. But what struck me the most wasn't just her apology. It was her vulnerability. She finally saw the damage she had done. She finally took responsibility. And while part of me wanted to believe her, to let her back in, I knew deep down that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean going back to what we had. It meant accepting what happened and moving forward. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't need to. I had already forgiven her in my heart. But I also knew that I couldn't open that door again. As I continued to rebuild my life, I started to understand something crucial. I had lost myself in the pursuit of someone else's love, to the point where I had forgotten how to love me. The process of healing wasn't just about accepting what had happened with her or my brother. It was about rediscovering my own worth. I began to meditate, to focus on what made me happy, not what made others happy. I went on walks by myself, started reading books that inspired me, and even took a solo trip to the coast. I learned that I didn't need anyone to validate my worth. I was whole, just as I was. This was the most important realization of all. The pain didn't disappear overnight, but it became more bearable. And in its place grew a sense of self-love that I had never known before. A year after everything fell apart, I ran into her again. It was at a coffee shop in the city, of all places. She looked different, more at peace, I suppose. We both froze when our eyes met. It had been a long time, and yet the weight of the past still hung in the air. I wasn't sure what to say. "Clara," she began, her voice softer than I remembered. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." I wasn't sure how to respond. Should I be angry? Should I pretend that everything was fine? But I realized in that moment, it didn't matter. We had both moved on. "I'm doing well," I said quietly. "I've found peace." Her eyes softened with what I could only interpret as regret. "I'm glad," she said. "You deserve happiness." The conversation was brief, but it felt like a weight lifted. No more resentment, no more unfinished business. We had both moved forward, and for the first time, I felt free. That encounter with her was the final piece of the puzzle. It helped me see that I was truly ready to let go. I no longer carried the burden of anger or betrayal. I had healed, and while I would never forget the way things ended, I had accepted that it was just part of my journey. I had learned some of the hardest lessons about trust, love, and forgiveness. But most importantly, I had learned how to stand on my own 2 feet. I wasn't the same person I had been when I met her. I was stronger, wiser, and more aware of my own worth. It wasn't an easy road, but it was one I had to walk to get to where I was now. And as I stood on the edge of my new life, I knew that whatever the future held, I was ready for it. It was during a quiet evening, after a long day of work, that I finally realized I was capable of loving again. It wasn't about filling the empty space she had left. It was about rediscovering what it meant to be loved without conditions. I had once believed love had to come from someone else, but I had learned that it had to start with me first. I wasn't looking for someone to complete me. I was already complete. I began to see love differently. It wasn't about possession or control. It was about connection, understanding, and respect. I wasn't ready to dive into another relationship yet, but I was open to the idea. For the first time, I felt like I was truly living, not just surviving. And that realization was liberating. A few months later, I received an invitation to a party. It wasn't just any party, it was their party. She and my brother had gotten engaged, and the celebration was meant to mark the beginning of their life together. The thought of attending was terrifying, but I knew deep down that it was the final step toward true closure. I debated whether to go, but in the end, I realized that it wasn't about them, it was about me. I wasn't going to let their happiness affect mine anymore. So, I decided to attend, not for them, but for my own peace of mind. When I walked into the room, everything felt different. The air was thick with awkwardness, but I stood tall. I didn't need anyone's approval or validation. I was there as a guest, nothing more. I didn't engage in small talk with her or my brother, but I didn't need to. I had found my peace, and that was enough. The party ended, and I left, knowing I had closed that chapter for good. Over the following months, I continued to live my life with purpose. I focused on my career, traveled more, and began to build new friendships. I even started dating again, cautiously at first, but without the baggage of the past weighing me down. It was a slow process, but each date reminded me that I wasn't broken, I was just evolving. And as time passed, I grew more and more confident in myself, knowing that I was worthy of real love. I realized that my happiness didn't depend on anyone else's actions. It was mine to cultivate. I had taken the most painful experience of my life and turned it into a lesson in self-love and resilience. It was a quiet victory, but it was mine. Years passed, and I eventually found myself in a place where I could look back on everything that had happened with a sense of gratitude. It might sound strange, but I was grateful for the pain, for the heartbreak. Those experiences had taught me more about myself than any success or happy moment ever could. I had learned the importance of boundaries, of not losing myself for the sake of someone else's happiness. And I had learned the power of forgiveness, not for them, but for me. Forgiving her and my brother didn't mean I had to forget. It didn't mean I had to reconcile with them. It meant I was freeing myself from the grip of anger and regret. I had forgiven them for me, so I could move on without the weight of bitterness dragging me down. Now, standing on the brink of a new chapter, I look ahead with hope. I've come a long way from the person I once was, and I know that I am ready for whatever the future holds. I don't need someone to complete me. I've learned to love myself, and I've learned that my worth isn't tied to anyone else's approval. The love I once sought outside of myself, I now find within. And as I move forward, I do so with the confidence that whatever challenges life brings, I will face them with grace, strength, and resilience. The future is mine to shape, and I will never again let someone take away my peace. I am no longer defined by the people who have hurt me. I am defined by the woman I've become. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you like the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.